Hey guys, we are in 2021, and last year, around this time, a little earlier, I did a tier list, and you guys know my feelings about tier lists. I generally don't like tier lists because I think most tier lists are too general. Even in the competitive environment, a competitive tier list doesn't account for maps, it doesn't account for team comps, where some heroes are really good for a specific team comp, but terrible for everything else. Competitive tier lists just don't work, in my opinion. Even Storm League tier lists are kind of bad because at the end of the day, if you just go on Hero's profile and sort by win rate, there's your tier list. There is a Storm League tier list. The higher win rate heroes are going to win more than the lower win rate heroes. Period. So if I'm going to create a tier list, which I've been asked for again this year to create a tier list, I would do it with very specific factors. And so this is my carrying in Storm League tier list. And so it has to every hero has to meet three particular factors. The first one is macro potential. When I did so this last year I've done 4 Bronze Master challenges, one for each role. I did my best to play like when I was playing assassin, I had to fill hero or tank and healer some, but for the most part I wanted to do it one of each role. And originally last year I actually showed him his videos. And when I showed him his videos last year, a lot of people really liked him, but a lot of people were like, okay, we're done watching low rank gameplay. But I got asked over and over and over and over. They're like, well, why don't you try this build when you don't have a 3-level lead? But I was showing those low rank videos because I wanted to show people what heroes I liked in low ranks and how to play them. And in almost every single game I played, I would get some level lead. And that's because of macro potential. If I'm going to be recommending a hero to carry, it's most likely going to be a hero that has a lot of macro potential because that's the easiest way to get level leads. And level leads make it to where the skill of your team doesn't need to be as good as the skill of the enemy team. You could be going against some Grandmaster Genji player that knows all the tricks, but if he's like 3 levels below you, he's not going to ever have the damage to kill your team, and your team's going to be able to just walk right through him. And so the number one factor is macro potential, getting an experienced lead. Number 2 is team fight impact, particularly solo team fight impact. Now, I'm not saying you walk into a fight alone. What I'm saying is certain heroes have a ton of CC, but they don't have a lot of damage. Well, a ton of CC can only get you so far if your team's not following up. So I prioritize heroes that have team fight impact, but on top of that priority, I prioritize heroes that have the most impact on their own. And then number 3 is kind of the contentious one, but this is just a piece that I like to put in here. A lot of people will watch my videos and they'll say like, that's awesome, but I can't do that. Or they'll watch fans' videos and they'll go, wow, that's awesome, but I can't do that. And so people want to be able to move up in rank and have a nice learning curve while they do it. So I'm picking the number 3rd thing is that this hero must either be easy to play or have a reasonable learning curve. Something that you can learn in a reasonable amount of time and be effective on that hero for a wide amount of time and still improve on that hero. And those are the 3 factors. So if you guys share this tier list anywhere, make sure to explain that it's based on those 3 factors. Because otherwise, I just don't like tier lists because they're usually just out of context or they're just rough. So let's get right into it. So the first thing that I want to explain is I will be explaining more about the heroes that are in the first 2 tiers, and I'm going to explain a lot less about the heroes that are in the lower tiers. I also want to explain that many of these heroes are amazing for the competitive environment, like Junkrat, but can be really rough to carry with. I have played a lot of Junkrat, and I have much higher win rates in high ranks than low ranks, because if I knock an enemy into my team, high ranks are more likely to turn and kill that target, where low ranks are more likely to just continue doing whatever they were doing, and they walk away free. And then otherwise, he just has less damage than some other assassins. So naturally, don't take this tier list as these are the best heroes. Take this tier list as these are the best heroes that I have found to carry on your own, assuming that you know the basics of what this hero is supposed to do. And I'm also going to give you a little bit more information of what I did while carrying with these heroes. So I've ordered these for tanks, bruisers, any form of damage dealer, and then healers. And it should be the same for all of these. I could be off a little bit, but number one, I only have one tank in S tier, and this one was really hard for me because I did really that was the fastest bronze to masters that I did was when I was playing tank. I did it in 1 week. I did bronze to masters in 1 week playing tank. And almost every time that my accounts decay from masters down to diamond 5 or plat 1, I generally will tank to get back up to masters or whatever. And so tanks were difficult for me because there were a lot of them that I wanted to put on here, but I put Mei up here. I ended up with a really high win rate on Mei. I was able to double soak, and during team fights, I had an incredible amount of potential. A single diver diving in the backline, you could usually just throw a snowball at, and that person would be blinded and slowed enough for your backline to usually get away from them or just kill them. Her W was an amazing engage when you combine it with icing. And it led to a really powerful slow and stun that often led to more kills than a lot of the other ones that you could do. She also has a build that's pretty heavy on damage and healing, so worst case, if you're in really low rank and your team's not doing anything or following up anything, you could go that build and pretty much just be this unkillable force that still has the same engages as a Nubarok. And she has great ults that can make some major plays. Avalanche and low ranks, I was able to send people into my keeps multiple times. My forts and towers and keeps multiple times, leading to kills pretty much by myself, which not a lot of other tanks can do that. Sure, Haymaker can do that to one person, but then you generally have to use your escape and everything to do that. And with her trait, she has a lot of self-healing during fights. She's got her unstoppable, and she just doesn't need a lot of help from her team to get a lot of work done. Double soak to get an experience lead. As early as level 1, you can begin double soaking. It's not as good as Joanna, but it's good enough to double soak. And she's just powerful. So what I recommend to do on Mei to get this pressure is double soak as early as you can. When objectives are spawning, make sure that you're at the objective with full health, full mana, and your fountain available. Use your primary focus on peeling for your team, because the enemies will be making mistakes all the way up until masters. You'll have someone dive in and try to kill someone other than you, and focus on peeling. You'll win about 70% of your team fights, and with you controlling the macro on the map, you'll usually have an experience lead, which means that you should win 60 to 70% of your games without really needing to do too much on Mei. Don't try to make any huge plays. That's one of the major reasons why people have kind of lost rank on Mei. But if you just play safe and you just play very careful, focus primarily on peeling, you're gonna win 60 to 70% of your games on Mei. Gazlo, currently the highest win rate hero in the game at the majority of ranks. He can wave clear, he can cam clear, and with Gravo Bomb and in a bit more of a mage build, you have enough damage to 100-0 all the backliners and do about half of all of the frontliners' health, and at the same time, you're going to gain your entire health bar back when you do that. So he's an incredible hero that can do just about everything, and most likely will end up getting some more nerfs. Seeing a 57% win rate hero is usually a hero that's likely to. This tier list is contingent on that no one gets changed. So if he gets nerfed, he may be moved down a little bit. Malthael, he's very easy to play. He has pretty much the best macro in the game. You can double soak very quickly, faster than most other heroes. You're also gaining a lot of life when you're double soaking, so if the enemy tries to poke you a little bit, you just gain it all back. You have some of the earliest and safest camp clear in the game. You can take a bruiser camp the second it spawns, and you don't even really need to kite. You can literally just position to where your basic attack hits all 4 and hold the Q button down. You don't need to move at all. So he's one of the easiest bruiser camp takes, one of the safest bruiser camp takes, and one of the earliest bruiser camp takes, at the same time as being one of the fastest early bruiser camp takes. I think the only one that's faster than him in the early game is probably like Hogger, Greymane, and maybe Blaze, but Blaze not at level 1. It would be between Hogger and Greymane, which are definitely faster than him, but Hogger can't do it to every bruiser camp, where Malthael, I believe, can do it to every bruiser camp. So he has that potential, and with some of my guides, you've seen a little bit more of his team fighting potential. But outside of the coordinated environment where people aren't focusing the right targets, you can stay alive almost forever in a team fight. So it's something that he's really, really powerful at. Orphea, one of the only heroes in the game that I felt like I could win any team fight when I was playing at a lower skill level than where I was at. When I smurfed on Orphea, I felt like she was literally the best hero in the game because the amount of survivability that she gets in her trait slash W build is insane. You can out heal, out shield, and also out DPS every hero in the game. I was able to win almost every 1v3 and most 1v4s when I would play Orphea in lower ranks. She's a little bit difficult to play, but her playmaking potential is really what makes her stand out and why I put her in S tier. She also has the double soaking potential, so what I recommend on Orphea is double soak for the early portions of the game. Be at every objective on time, but your power spikes are level 7 for damage and level 13 for survivability. So make sure that you don't do anything crazy until level 13 and try to get to level 7s before you even enter the first objective fight. Cassia, very high win rate hero, someone that's just, as long as you can stay moving during team fights, she's very powerful. She's got great wave clear, okay cam clear, and during team fights, she's one of the few heroes that can pretty much control an entire fight from the damage roll. So I highly recommend getting good at Cassia, but she's very active and is pretty difficult. Because of her difficulty, I've thought about moving her down to A tier. Raynor, a very easy hero that has some of the best cam clear. You take Exterminator, you have the best cam clear out of ranged assassins in the early portions of the game. And also, he has a lot of burst if you just get good at his like auto attack W reset Q couple auto attack combo. In under 3 seconds, you can usually do about 66% of backliner's health. So if a Jaina steps up a little bit too much, you just pop her. Gone. And Raynor also has a lot of self healing, and you're gonna notice that usually the ones in this top tier have a lot of self healing because what I found when I was playing someone like Rayman, who's incredible for his damage, his camp clear, his wave clear, is that during team fights, if I got hit by poke at all, or if someone just shot at me a couple times, if my healer is not helping me, I do nothing. And so I wanted to pick heroes in this area that can stay in fights a little bit longer on their own, and that's why Raynor ended up here. On to Tychus. Tychus is just busted right now, in my opinion. His grenade build can do about 25% of a backliner's health with a single grenade on a 10-second cooldown. You pick up Titan Grenade, it could be on a 6-second cooldown. And so the fact that anytime that someone gets below 20%, you can throw a grenade and kill them before you get Titan Grenade is crazy. And the fact that you can get someone down to 30% health just by using your trait is also crazy. And so with Bigger They Are in the grenade build, I was able to have like an 85% win rate, and I only really started playing him when my damage account was in Diamond. So from Diamond to Masters, I had like an 85% win rate with Tychus. He just seems incredibly strong. I do take the sustain talent at level 13, so when I'm done draining the health of someone, I will get that heal. Giving him a little bit more survivability. And the great part is at the start of an awkward fight, you can always pop Odin and just stay at a long range, kind of see how the fight's going, and then hop out. Tychus has one of the best pick potential if you're catching someone that's out of position. If a Jane is pushing too far in lane, you can stay mounted, walk right up to her, use your trait, use your dash, use your Q, your W, Jaina dies. And that's also about 80% of the roster you can kill alone in under 4 seconds. And so the majority of what I did on Tychus was I double soaked and I looked for picks. I didn't do camps at all. And then during objectives, I'd usually try to get one pick on whatever their frontliner is. Then I would go Odin and I would start just poking down their backline. And then I would just finish off people with grenade right when Odin's gone. I'll just chuck a grenade out and usually be able to secure an extra kill or two. I was the reason for usually about 2 to 3 kills every single fight, and I was still able to double soak and keep my team ahead in experience. Rhaegar, the only healer in the game that can get you an experience lead, and that's really the biggest thing that I did with Rhaegar. Your team fight potential is okay. The few things that you need to know on Rhaegar is he does way more damage in the early game than you would imagine. Part of the reason why I use him as a bruiser a lot. And on top of that, he has the ability to do bruiser camp at level 1, and he's the only healer that can do that. From my understanding, Karazim probably can, but it would take a long time. And so that's the thing about Rhaegar is you play him to get an experience lead. if you are good at knowing how the macro works on a map, you will find yourself winning an incredible amount of games with Rhaegar. On my healer bronze to masters account, I focused primarily on macro. Rhaegar was the highest win rate healer I had, and I believe it was at 78%. Stukov was the next one, and this one's difficult again to put up here because he's rather difficult to get this down. But his level 7 targeted excision talent makes it to where when you activate your trait with only one W on a target, you will get a 5-second cooldown on your trait. What I've found is in Storm League, where the fights are uncoordinated and they can go in any direction, if you're good with that talent, the enemies can never kill anyone. Because you're landing roots on their front line, you're silencing people, and you're doing these heals every 5 seconds. It was the easiest thing to carry with in these fights, just because the amount of healing that he brought out, you're able to win 70 to 80% of your fights if you get good at that. He brings very little in macro. There are a lot of times I was using my silence to cover wave clear for the team. I would use my E in one lane so I could wipe it, and then I would go to like mid lane and cover mid lane, and I'd go back to bot lane and like use my E to wipe the wave. It's not great wave clear, but it's okay, and it's good enough to keep your team in the game. Early game, I would say focus on comboing as well as getting good at that thing. By level 7, just out heal everything. On to tier A. So tier S, you can carry most Storm League games. I would imagine if you get good at these heroes and understand what they're meant to be used for, you can see yourself at a 60 to 70% win rate. When we get to A tier, they're either a little bit more situational, or they have like a major downside that causes me to tier, as opposed to another tier. You're going to see a lot of tanks in this tier. I had the most success in my tank run. When I was doing the bronze to masters for each role, tank was definitely my fastest role. And so I felt like there's a lot of tanks that can have huge impact in games, but here are the reasons. So Imperious main tank is where I put him in A tier. Solo lane is okay, but I find solo laners need to have that double soak. So Imperious main tank is the only tank in the game that can actually like wipe teams. And what I mean by that is, if you land a spear on one person, you can do about half of their health. If you land a spear on 2 people, you can do about 70% of both of their healths. And if you land a spear on 3 people, not only can you stun lock them, but you can do their entire health bar. And people are going to make mistakes. So the better you get at spears, excuse me. The better you get at spears, the easier it is to carry games. The one downside, he has almost no wave clear, which means he got moved down from S to A purely because of the wave clear. If you play him on 2-lane maps, I think he's an S tier, honestly. And that's Imperious. ETC is always a good one. He has enough burst damage in his kind of bursty build to about half someone's health. An auto attack build, you can out sustain a lot of teams. And he's got wave clear. Anubarak, he actually has kind of a 100 to 0 combo a lot of people don't know about. When you get to level 13, either talent you take, but I take Burning Beetles. If you cocoon someone, dive into a backliner like Ana, you stun them, you get your shield out, you land your E, you've got an extra beetle that spawns or whatever. Couple auto attacks while they're stunned. All those beetles hitting, plus the burning portion of it, you can do just about Ana's health during that stun lock. And you've cocooned someone, so your team's walking into their backline because you cocoon their front line, jump on their backline. And so he actually has a lot of playmaking potential. His wave clear is rather weak, which holds him back, and his survivability is a little weak, holds him back. But being able to engage from a mile away and also have an incredible team fight impact on your own is why he's here. Joanna, always a hero I want to put in S tier. She doesn't really do anything in particular better than others, and in team fights, it's not that impactful on your own. But she does bring a lot of CC and a lot of blinds. Diablo, he's an unstoppable force in auto attack build. He out heals almost everyone. But again, he doesn't have that oomph that a lot of the other ones have, and he doesn't have wave clear, which holds him back. W build can do a little bit more oomph in team fights, but at the same time, still doesn't really have that wave clear. We've got Garrosh. Same reasons. Very little wave clear. Very difficult to do the bruiser build, but the bruiser build can kind of 1v3. and also just throw people into your team. I when I was doing my bronze masters in tank, I had a lot of games where I felt like I was just hard carrying games. I was walking in, slowing everyone, out healing everyone's damage, and right as a damage healer got a little too close to me, I just threw it in my team and continued going towards their team. And I would just start hitting them, and then I just throw another person back there, and I felt unstoppable. But lack of wave clear, as well as difficulty of playing that build. Murden's an easier version of Garrosh's Bruiser build, and he can be very beneficial. Lack of wave clear really holds him back, and he's a little difficult. Diva, great double soaking, very powerful hero. Doesn't really have that burst that you want in like a soul laner. Can do camps, can do waves, and is really annoying to kill. Sonya is a little bit burstier version of her with a little bit less survivability in the early game, a little bit more survivability in the late game. But they both do very similar things. Deathwing lacks camp clear, can't get healed, but his Q build, if you can use it from a flank, or from Fog of War or from a bush, level 16, if you hit someone for 2 full seconds in Q build that is a healer, or a backliner, they will die. And if you can hit a couple people with this, you will wipe a team. And he's one of the few heroes in the game where 2 seconds on a basic ability is enough to wipe an entire team, like him and Imperius. I didn't put him in the top tier because positioning is really important, and that is a skill that's a little bit more difficult. But I do think that a Deathwing is one of the easier ones to carry with. His wave clear is a little slow and a little inefficient. So that's another thing, and you can't really do camps. So you have an amazing team fight. Also, it's a late game team fight, so it's a little tricky. Leoric, same position. He's a really powerful hero. I used him a lot. You can double soak in the early game to keep your team ahead, and then in the late game, he has just some of the best level 20 power spikes. You've got the March W build, where you can swing and drain off of everyone and do like a huge impact in a team fight. You can go Entomb and silence people and go like auto attack build, and then they can't get away, and you just until they die. Or you can go like the more new W hybrid build, where like you go the W talents all the way up to 20, you throw a W on someone, and you're doing AoE damage to everyone. And all of that works, and it's all very, very powerful. Ragnaros to me will always be an A tier when it comes to carrying, but he's almost more so an A tier now because they lower the cooldown of Sulfurious Smash. Now you have great double soaking, great camp clear, and then when you get to a team fight, whatever person tries to channel something, or if your team lands any sort of stun, you follow up with Sulfurious Smash, and it's almost a guaranteed kill. So being able to be a macro machine and also be able to sneak a kill here and there is great. One other thing to note is if you're ever on defense against a siege and you use your trait, and you stun someone with your Q, you can always follow up with Sulfurious Smash, which means that by yourself, you can 100 to 0 a target relatively easily as early as level 10. I think it's more like 70% of their health level 10, and then if you take the upgraded trait at level 20, then it's enough to 100 to 0 most people. If there's 2 people next to each other, you pretty much just prevented like their entire push because you wiped 2 different people. Ragnaros is a very powerful hero that has a ton of carry potential. We get to KT. Very strong hero. His range is pretty good. He can double soak. He can do camps relatively easily. Can't really solo them too well until about 13. But he's just relatively easy to play and get a lot of value. With the Ignite at level 16 and Pyroblast, if they have a healer like an Ana that doesn't have a lot of self-healing and a lot of survivability, you can simply just use a trait QR, and you don't even need the trait, but it makes it easier to land. You can do a trait QR and Ana dies. 2 abilities, QR, that's it, and Ana dies. And so he can bring a lot of impact to a team fight because you bring a lot of poke in clustered areas, force enemies to spread out, and you do have that one-shot potential. Chromie, just more difficult. She's a top tier hero for sure, but she's just more difficult than people think she is. Forcing me to kind of move her down a little bit because I just watched too many Chromies where they just poke people and the poke just gets healed up. Lucio, I've mentioned this before. I had a lot of success in my healer bronze to masters, surprisingly to me because he brings no macro potential to the game. but purely because damage tends to be spread out over the course of a fight. And so I just went Lucio and I just healed everyone at the same time. And I won a lot more fights than I lost purely because I could keep teams up like this. I didn't even make a lot of plays with them. I just knocked people away if they were doing a lot of damage, and I just healed everyone. It was very easy, and I, I want to say you could get about a 60% win rate with them if you just play safe, knock away the enemies when they're doing too much damage, heal everyone, have good ult usage, and that's about it. But he doesn't really have overall impact, so I've thought about moving him down. Brightwing, you can take Bribe, worst case, if your team doesn't have any camp clear, and you can kind of control the map a little bit by bribing correctly. Or simply just going her teleport build is what I generally went. I had about a 75% win rate with Brightwing on my healer account. And I went Emerald Wind. Now you guys can go the Blink Heal, which is the more meta talent. It's got a higher win rate. It's just generally better talent. But I personally love the idea of jumping in where the tank is, spreading out the entire enemy team. We kill their front line, and then their back line's too afraid to come back into the fight after they got pushed away. And that's what happened the majority of the time when I used my Emerald. Um, I usually went the Z build. I would sometimes get bribed depending on the map. And the biggest thing I would recommend is don't play Brightwing like a global hero, because then you lose your best heal. What I mean by that is you want to be constantly healing everyone with your trait. And then when you need that big heal, you can use your Z for that. The problem is a lot of times people on teams of Brightwing goes to the opposite lane of the objective, is just pushing, and the enemies lose, or your whole team loses like half their health when you finally jump in, and you haven't had that sustained healing the entire time. Or you jump in early before the fight happens, and you just lose your big heal. So you're either losing your trait heal or you're losing your big heal. So I almost never played Brightwing as a global hero. What I did do that a lot of people don't do is I actually double soaked on Brightwing. Whenever there was no objective going on, I would actually double soak. 2 Qs, couple auto attacks, you can wipe a wave. And so I just kept using Qs, wiping waves, and I used my E to get movement speed to get from lane to lane. I had a lot of success with Brightwing. Uther, I think, is top tier. I think he's the best healer in the game, not necessarily for healing, but for the utility he brings to the team. But he's difficult to play, so I've moved him down a little bit. Give your team armor when they're taking damage. Try to always abuse the 50 armor if you take that talent level 7. Get good at the stuns, the double stuns, the triple stuns, stun targets your team's already attacking, and you'll find yourself doing really well on Uther. I also really like the talent level 13. Not a lot of people take it, but your basic attacks heal for the damage you deal. You actually effectively heal more with Uther using the Q and 5 auto attacks than the entirety of Lucio's Amp It Up. So it's strong for a talent. Anyways, you literally get a talent that makes you a better Lucio. You don't have like movement speed or anything. You bring other stuff. All right, B tier. So I'm not going to talk as much about B tier heroes. I still think that any one of these heroes can get you to masters with a higher than a 50% win rate. But they're either more situational or more difficult, or there's just one major downside that made it to where I didn't really like playing those heroes. Varian, highest health in the game right now with taunt build. Twin Blades is okay, but it's just not as fast damage as I would like. Colossal Smash is just too squishy and too all-in. Taunt doesn't have an escape, doesn't have wave clear, and I feel like you need just a little bit of follow-up to make it scary. Dahaka, I've seen a ton of Dahaka one tricks get to Grandmasters, but his timing is a little bit more difficult. Same reasons as Alexstrasza. He seems easy to play, but he's not. Alexstrasza seems easy to play, but she's not. Alexstrasza was one of them in my healer account. I used a lot, and I had a really high win rate with her, but she's one of the lowest win rate heroes in the game, which usually if you can do well with a hero, but they have a low win rate, the high skill cap hero, or a more difficult hero. And it's the same reason why Genji had like a 40% win rate when he was used all the time in HEC. Same reason why Hanzo had a 40% win rate when he was used all the time in HEC. High skill cap, but difficult hero. We've got Urel. Great hero. But I just find she's a little too difficult to get a lot of value out of, and she requires kind of multiple things to keep happening in fights to be able to just have free reign. If you jump in the back line You can zone a little bit, but you're not going to get any kills because oftentimes you jump in the back line, and in Storm League, the enemies are going to start turning on you, and your team's going to run away. And that happened to me way more often than it should in low ranks. In high ranks, you jump in their back line, your team kills their front line. But what happened to me in low ranks a lot of times, I would jump in their back line, they would turn on me, and then the enemy team or my team would just walk away. But she does have wave clear, not great cam clear, but she can still make a huge impact. Rexar, amazing hero. Pretty difficult to play, so I'm moving him down a little bit. Zool, great hero, a little bit of weak team fights, very predictable damage, and easy to CC if you're going like W build, and not a lot of sustain in W build outside of actually swiping. Where like Q build, you have a lot more sustain, but it's very predictable damage. Grawl, a great playmaker and someone who has a lot of outplay potential. But what I find a lot of the times with Thrall, anyways, is that he requires a lot of skill to do slightly better than everyone else, and that's it. He's not as impactful as I wish he was. I found the best luck when I was just going the 100-0 combo with Sundering, and I could just start every team fight with a kill. But outside of that, there's other bruisers that can do that and do much more outside of that. Murky. I actually think Murky is better than I made him out to be last year. I think just basically going Q build on Murky is good enough in team fights, especially with less coordination, and you can make a lot of plays happen. March is pretty good on its own, or if you do have a little bit of follow up, you could go with Octo Grab. But I don't think he's terrible. Kira, probably the highest damage solo laner in the game, and also used sometimes as a melee assassin. But if you go in at the wrong time, you lose. So I just don't recommend her too much, but even her auto attack build's relatively easy to play, and you can get a lot of work done. So if you can get good at knowing when to go in, you're solid. Gul'dan, very predictable damage. It hits a lot of people. His best build for really getting the damage out where you want it to go, you self-root for a while, which is taking the W talents at level 4 and 7. You get a lot more single target damage, you get a lot more burst, but you have to stand still for a bit. Very strong, but just nowhere near the other people, the other range assassins. Falstad, a lot of macro potential. His sustained damage in fights is a little bit lower than I want it to be in either build, and he's a little bit more difficult to get value out of it without a coordinated group. Greymane. I love Greymane. I think he's great. I think he's an awesome damage dealer. But what I found was when I was trying to carry as an assassin and I had a healer that wasn't really doing that well, I would take like 2 hits and I could just never re-enter a fight. And that happened way too often. So I've just moved him down, and I've moved a lot of other people that kind of have that same thing where if you take a little bit of damage, you can't re-enter a fight. It just feels bad. The healer or the assassins that I put up there are assassins that usually have self-healing or really long range. He doesn't really have either of those. Mephisto, I think he's really powerful, but if you miss too much of your abilities, you're dead for 10 seconds. And so it's very skill-based. Jaina, too low of range. I used her in my assassin playthrough quite a bit, but what I used was that Ring of Frost combo that I've shown in some of my videos where I throw Ring of Frost, I root them in place, and then I use Icy Veins and I throw everything out, and I can kill tanks left and right. I've noticed when I've coached people with Jaina, that's really difficult to do, even if you practice it a lot. So I'm putting her a little bit lower because of skill, but I do still think she's great for carrying. Lunara, she's great right now. She does have some challenges where her wave clear and cam clear is a little bit lower if you go the self-healing, and if you don't go the self-healing, you have the same problem as Greymane. But otherwise, she's got great sustained damage, and you can get pretty bursty if you take the Q talent at level 7, as well as the Leaping Strike at level 10. In fact, it's about 100-0 amounts of damage if you do 2 auto attacks, W, Q, R, and then auto attack, and that's enough to kill just about any backliner. Nazebo, I think he's great, but he either requires follow-up to have bursty damage, or setup. He needs setup if he wants bursty damage, or he just does predictable AoE damage that's easy to heal. Outside of that, though, if you're playing against someone who can't handle that AoE damage, it's great. And if you are playing with someone with setup, that's also great. Tracer, a little bit more sustain, a lot more that you can do in team fights anyways. You don't have great wave clear, you don't have great cam clear, and she's a little bit more difficult to play. Sylvanas, I found the same problem I had with the Greymane. I was playing great. I was getting a ton of damage every fight, but I felt like I just had to back all the time and grab fountains all the time because every fight would start. I would walk up relatively short range. I would be melting the tank, and then I would just take a couple pokes here and there, a couple shots here and there, and I'm half health. I'm just sitting next to my healer waiting. I'm getting no healing, and I'm essentially dead for the majority of the fight. Tassadar, similar reasons. No self sustain, can be really powerful at times, but if you're missing a Q, you're Mephisto. You're dead for a while. And if you pop Archon and you take a little bit too much damage, you're out of the fight. Vala, same reasons. She doesn't get sustained until 13. Low range, gets poked out of the fight. You feel useless in the early portions. And the early portions are so important because if you get a lead in the early portions of the game, most teams just start tilting if they're behind. And so you can usually just win if you get a lead. Zul'jin, same reasons. He's just really difficult to get value out of, and he's so weak in the early portions of the game because he's not stacked, doesn't have the extra range, doesn't have anything like that. He does have sustain, but it requires you to not do anything in the fight and be far enough away that it's kind of like you're dead for a portion of the fight, and then you come back in. Deckard, too difficult to get value out of, and you could be the best at Deckard, set up these awesome fights, and if people don't follow up your routes and people don't pick up your potions, you're useless. Now, Furion, a little too difficult to get value out of. Alexstrasza, a little bit too difficult to get value out of. Ariel requires another person to get the most value out of her. Otherwise, it's better to play a different healer. Anduin requires another person to be paying attention to get the most value out of him. Lily, she was lower tier, I think, last time, but she's surprisingly good at keeping people topped off, and her W build's pretty good against a lot of different. C tier heroes, in my opinion, are heroes that are just either way too difficult or have way too much of a learning curve, or they're heroes that I just feel like they're lacking too much to be used very well. So number one, Stitches. I think Stitches requires either way too much coordination to be able to follow up good gorges and hooks, or I just think he's too difficult to land enough hooks to make it worth playing him. Blaze, I just think that he just doesn't bring enough. He's got an amazing stun and amazing zone control that your team will not follow up, and they will not abuse the fact that you're controlling an entire zone. Combustion build gives you enough damage, you're pretty scary, but you're kind of a one trick at that point. Blaze is kind of a one trick pony at that point. You're there to have a really powerful engage for a small amount of time and then have like nothing for the rest of the time. Got good double soaking though. His auto attack build has good camp clear. Mal'Ganis is strong but very situational. He's great on point control, pretty weak on other maps because you're just trying to chase people down and not really ever catching. Imperious main tank, Tyrael main tank, just requires too much teamwork and it's great at countering things, but other than that, in the soul lane, I still really think it's good for soul laning, but it is a little bit harder to play. Chen, no wave clear, no camp clear. You have no macro potential. I'm not even going to really recommend him. He's great at bullying people in lane, but outside of that, it's not worth it. Artanis, good camp clear, terrible wave clear. One of the biggest things I did in my solo lane thing was I played against a ton of Artanises, and the second I started double soaking was pretty much when we won the game. Because I would push out one lane, he would be Q, auto attack, auto attack, auto attack, Q. I've already pushed out the second lane by this time. By the second Q that he's done, I've already pushed out the second lane. He starts getting over to travel there, and I could dismount him once and then go up. I could still push out top, and he's missed half the experience at mid lane. He grabs mid lane, and I'm already back dismounting him and then going to mid again. I would absolutely destroy Artanises without ever needing to actually fight them. And so he's situational. Junkrat, I explained my reasoning earlier. I have really good win rates in high ranks because I can pop people over and my team instantly blows them up. But when I pop people over in low ranks, it just isn't worth it. My damage just isn't high enough sustained to get any value, and I need to get people low enough to where my ult gets value, so he's just not good. Asmodan, Q build, his damage just gets healed up. And in the macro builds, the mages do about the same macro as him. And they also have better team fights. Hanzo, too difficult, or at least a too difficult of a learning curve. Arthas, a little bit too situational. Abathur, probably just too difficult. And then we get into Phoenix, really just too difficult. I mean, you could play Raynor and absolutely dominate, and you can do it with half the skill of Phoenix, who can do less wave clear, less cam clear, and equal wave clear, less cam clear, and doesn't really bring too much more that Raynor doesn't bring. Maiev just too difficult. Yes, you can carry with it. I've got friends that have done it. Alarak just too feast or famine. If you're winning, he's great. If you're losing, he's not that great, and he's also a little situational. Kel'Thuzad, kind of same thing. If you're winning, he's great. In the right situations, he's awesome, but he's also very difficult. Kerrigan, really rough learning curve. Li Ming, if you're not comboing with like repulsion and pulling people in and blowing things up, you're not bringing that much. Too many of your abilities get blocked, and she doesn't have the wave clear and cam clear that you would want from a mage, and she just doesn't have the consistency. On top of her difficulty is a lot higher. Medivh can be great, but he's a mix of too difficult and requires a little bit too much teamwork. Prometheus is okay. I had him D tier before, but I've moved him up to C. He's got great wave clear, okay cam clear, great point control, and he can be pretty bursty. Sergeant Hammer, I think, is actually really good, but she's just a little slow with a lot of things. Her damage is slow and predictable. You don't have a lot of ways to enhance that, have a little bit of burst. Her movements are slow and predictable. She has a hard time double soaking, and she's best if you're just left alone, but that's inconsistent whether or not teams are going to leave you. Samuro, awesome hero, just too much of a learning curve. Lost Vikings, awesome hero, too much of a learning curve. Zeratul, awesome hero, similar problems as like Greymane, where if you go in and you don't get something done immediately, you're not going to have the sustain. Zagara, I like her, but her damage is too slow, chaotic, which means it goes to people that you don't want it to go to, and you also don't have a lot of sustain. Zarya, I think she's a great hero. I think she's just got too much of a learning curve and requires a tad too much teamwork. Ana, even if you were the best Ana, she's rough. No wave clear, no cam clear, and if you nano boost a mage that doesn't know what they're doing, not a real ult. If you sleep dart someone that just instantly gets woken up, it's not a real ability. And if you throw out your W and your team doesn't attack the target that your W's on, they walk away and they just get healed up when your W times out. Ana's very, very difficult to carry with, even though she's a great hero. Whitemane, awesome healing, but she tends to heal more in bursts and struggles against sustained fights. Also, she's rather difficult to play her correctly. Tyrande, very high upkeep, very difficult to play, generally requires you to follow up on a tank that may or may not ever engage correctly. Kharazim, very situational. It can be great, but as you start moving into higher ranks, he's going to get CC'd a lot more, and you're going to get a lot less time to heal, and against a lot of poke, you're going to really... Cho'Gall, this is a guide about solo play, so Cho'Gall is literally the bottom tier. But if you did duo queue, Cho'Gall is probably A tier. He is a little bit situational on what maps he's good on, but stun build is still very good. Auto attack build is still very good. Genji, no wave clear, very little cam clear. He is very difficult to get value out of, but can still be a good hero. Illidan can be a good hero, kind of similar reasons. Very low wave clear. Can do camps, but is actually pretty slow at doing camps. So even though you can do it safely, it's just slow. If you have a global, you can bring more. I've debated putting him in C tier, but honestly, there's just so many other people that are scarier, and I just would rather not even really see him unless you've got a little bit of coordination with Nova. She just brings like nothing to the game. Like, not to be like rude to like Nova players, she's probably got a decent win rate. Let me scroll down to the bottom of the win rates. She's the 5th from bottom. Where like Genji and Hanzo are Zarya, Hanzo, Medivh, and Genji are all lower than her. But she's just... Bribe's okay, but it's not as good as like a mage that's just clearing camps. Her burst is okay, but it's not as good as the mages that are higher than her. And her sustain damage is okay, but it's not as good as like the sustain damage healers that are higher than her. The only thing she has going for her is stealth, and really not that beneficial in team fights. And outside of team fights, a couple picks here and there can usually be done better with Tychus. Butcher, just feast or famine. When you're doing well with Butcher, it's awesome. When you're not doing well with Butcher, it's awful. His wave clear and cam clear is okay, but it's nowhere near as good as the other people. Valeera, great hero, but kind of similar reasons. Her wave clear, cam clear is really bad. during team fights, the most skilled Valeras usually get 2 kills and then will die or back off. They usually get 1 kill, back off, and they go back and get another kill. That's the highest skilled Valera players. The average Valera player gets no kills and brings no macro. So that's my big reason why I don't recommend. And Morales just brings very little impact to games. If her E was a stun or a pull in, I would say maybe. But the fact is you can just keep people topped off, but that's about it. She's a solid like 49% win rate hero where she's easy to play and she'll be able to keep that going, but she doesn't really bring anything that can carry games. This is about carrying games. So that is my tier list. Keep in mind that this is all about who can carry games through macro, team fight impact, and also you don't need to play like a grandmaster to move up in rank playing these heroes. You will need to know how to play them because if we just look at hot slogs, many of the heroes that I put at decent win rates probably are not actually going to be the highest win rate heroes. Let's scroll up a little bit. I put Garrosh and Imperius pretty high, yet they're lower win rate heroes. You need to know how to do Imperius's combos, and you need to make sure to draft him in the right situations. And that's why I put him as A tier, is if you need to be double soaking the whole game, Imperius is going to fall behind. And if you can't do the spear combos and follow up correctly, you're not going to have the impact that I put him at A tier for. You need to make sure that you're playing these heroes the way they should be playing. But for the most part, you're going to notice that a lot of the heroes that I've recommended and I put in lower tiers are lower win rates. And then some of them that I put in higher tiers are higher win rates, with the exception of things like Lost Viking and Hogger. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about Hogger. He is not in this program yet, and I would put him at a solid B. And I don't really want to put him on this tier list yet because I think that he's going to get balanced this Wednesday. But I'm going to put him at a solid B. And my reasoning for this is that I think that I think that he's good. I think that he does require a lot of skill, though, knowing where you can get the camps and clear the camps really quickly, knowing where you can do your combos, where you can spin. He does require a lot more skill, but he is also pretty strong right now. Even if you don't have that perfect, I still think that he's good. So I'd put him at a B. If he gets buffed, an A or an S. And if he gets nerfed, he'd probably still stay in a B, depending on how hard he gets nerfed. And that's about where I would put Hogger. So that's everything. You guys now can see my tier list explained, what I think you need to be doing on these heroes to get these values. And these are with those criteria. So if you share this tier list with anyone, make sure that you include the criteria that this is to carry, and it has those 3 major criterias with it. But with that being said, that's my tier list. Thank you guys so much for watching, and feel free to check out my other videos.